Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Gaurav Sharma and with me is Manoj Singh Rana bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi attributes success of Operation Ganga to India's growing influence in the global arena. Over 15,900 Indians brought back from Ukraine's neighboring countries under Operation Ganga so far. Russian President Vladimir Putin says West's sanctions on Russia are equivalent to declaring war. UN Security Council scheduled to hold emergency meeting on Monday on humanitarian crisis triggered in Ukraine due to Russian military operations. In men's cricket, India beat Sri Lanka by an innings and 222 runs in the first cricket test at Mohali, take a 1-0 lead in two-match series. And in Women's Cricket World Cup, India thrashed Pakistan by 107 runs in their opening encounter in New Zealand.
As we start the bulletin, we appeal to our listeners to stay safe from COVID-19 by following these 4 simple steps. Get fully vaccinated. Wear a face mask. Maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing. And focus on hand and face hygiene. And now the news in detail.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said India was able to bring back thousands of its nationals safely from war zone in Ukraine under Operation Ganga due to country's growing influence in the global arena. Here's a report.
Prime Minister Modi was addressing the students, faculty and alumni after inaugurating Golden Jubilee celebration of Symbiosis University at Pune in Maharashtra today.
यूक्रेन संकट के समय भी देख रहे हैं कि कैसे ऑपरेशन गंगा चलाकर भारत अपने नागरिकों को युद्ध क्षेत्र से सुरक्षित बाहर निकाल रहा है। दुनिया के बड़े-बड़े देशों को ऐसा करने में कई मुसीबतें झेलनी पड़ रही हैं, लेकिन ये भारत का बढ़ता हुआ प्रभाव है कि हम हजारों छात्रों को वहां से अपने वतन वापस ला चुके हैं.
The Prime Minister highlighted on the confidence of New India and mentioned that India is among the largest economies of the world and maintains the 3rd largest startup ecosystem of the world. He said missions like Startup India, Stand Up India, Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat are representing the aspirations of countrymen. Mr. Modi said, today's India is innovating, improving and influencing the whole world. He said that India has emerged as a global leader in the sectors which were previously considered out of reach. India has become the 2nd largest mobile manufacturer in the world. Regarding defense sector, the Prime Minister said India, which was recognized as the world's largest importer, is now becoming a defense exporter. He said 2 major defense corridors are coming up in the country today, where the biggest modern weapons will be made to meet the defense needs of the country.
डिफेंस सेक्टर में हम दशकों से ये मानकर चल रहे थे कि जो दूसरे देश हमें देंगे हम उसी के भरोसे कुछ कर सकते हैं, लेकिन आज स्थिति भी बदली है, परिस्थिति भी बदले हुए है.
Mentioning the recent reforms in the sectors of geospatial systems, drones, semiconductors and space technology, Prime Minister Modi called upon the students to take full advantage of opening of various sectors. Reshma Tiwari for World News, All India Radio.
Over 2,100 Indian citizens were brought back on Sunday by 11 special civilian flights from Ukraine's neighbouring countries under Operation Ganga. With this, more than 15,900 Indians have been brought back since the special flights began on 22nd February. The Civil Aviation Ministry said the number of Indians airlifted by 66 special civilian flights has gone up to 13,852. Till date, the Indian Air Force has flown 10 sorties to bring back 2,056 passengers while taking 26 tons of relief load to these countries as part of Operation Ganga. Among the special civilian flights on Sunday, 9 landed in New Delhi while 2 reached Mumbai. There were 6 flights from Budapest, 2 from Bucharest and 2 from Rzeszów and 1 from Košice. On Monday, 8 special flights are expected to operate from Budapest, Suceava and Bucharest, bringing in more than 1,500 Indians back home.
The Indian Embassy in Ukraine has requested all the Indian nationals who still remain in Ukraine to fill up their details contained in a Google form on an urgent basis. The form is available on the website and the social media handle of the embassy.
In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on Operation Ganga and developments in Ukraine. We are joined by Ashok Sajjanhar, a former diplomat, and Simran Sodhi, a journalist.
On the 10th day since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Russian forces have escalated their bombardment in multiple regions of the country, including Mariupol, surrendered by Russian troops. Ukraine and Russia have blamed each other as the city evacuation fails again. More than 500,000 people are trapped in the port city by encircling Russian forces, are nervously preparing to evacuate. Ceasefire was announced, but it did not work. Ambassador Prakash, where do we see this war going?
It is tragedy which is man-made, which should never have happened. And the seeds of this were sown in 2008. Now what is happening is that practically all sides are literally sleepwalking into, not only they walked into the conflict, they are escalating it, and things are getting grimmer by the day. Very briefly, Russia was provoked, no doubt. Russia's security interests were ignored. They tried to contain it, while the West tried to contain Russia while keep on hypocritically saying that they were not. Russia was aggrieved, certainly, but Russia has overdone it. They have overplayed their hand. In this time and age, to have this kind of an aggression is something that cannot be condoned. And it seems that the Russian leadership, that is President Putin, miscalculated. They thought it will be a quick affair. They thought that they will be welcomed. None of that has happened. The tenacity shown by President Zelensky is exceptional. He has rallied his forces. He has become a legend in his lifetime. But what he perhaps does not realize that he has been played. The West has committed support, but there are no boots around. They are adding fuel to fire by giving more and more arms. The death and destruction is taking place in Ukraine. Whatever happens, there will be one biggest loser will be Ukraine, and the West would have achieved several purposes, or the US would have achieved several of its objectives of weakening Russia, of damaging the European-Russian relations, and in the process, Ukraine is a pawn which has been sacrificed.
The President Putin has said that conflict will only stop Ukraine stops fighting and Russia's demands are met. The President Putin has said Russia's military operation would not halt until Kyiv or President Zelensky stopped resisting and fulfill all of Kremlin's demands. He has said that Ukraine's negotiators should take more constructive approach in talks with Moscow to take into account the reality on the ground. What are those reality on the ground? What are the demands of the President Putin, which he expects to meet by the President Zelensky?
Put it succinctly, he wants Crimea to be recognized as a part of Russia. He wants a change of regime in Ukraine because he believes that Zelensky is the source of the root cause of the problem. And he wants a neutral Ukraine and a government in Ukraine which is, if possible, pro-Russia and in the minimum not anti-Russia. So regime change is something that he wants. And as I mentioned, he thought that he can achieve it, but frankly, Russians are bogged down. And you mentioned about the damage that is taking place. It is true that they exercise restraint because they know that every death of an innocent citizen in Ukraine means that the opposition to Russia will become stronger. As it is, every Ukrainian is united against Russia. And President Zelensky has shown exceptional grit, but he continues to provoke Putin. He continues to effectively challenge Putin. He is not willing to relent. He has this hope, which I don't know how well it is founded, because while he's a very brave leader, he's also politically not that experienced. And he continues to seek should be sanctions against Russia, that there should be further tightening of screws on Russia. He has been saying that there should be a no-flight zone. He has been seeking arms. So there is very little meeting ground or no meeting ground at the moment. In the meantime, the fighting is getting prolonged, and a desperate Russia, an angry Putin, what he would do next is something which is quite worrisome, because if he goes in for an all-out attack, it would mean a lot of human misery and a lot of human suffering, which is the most unfortunate outcome, and which will have consequences for everybody, but also consequences impact on India.
Yes, you talked about the consequences. We have already started seeing the consequences on the energy supply. The invasion of Ukraine by Russia, which is Europe's top gas supplier, has sharpened concerns for disruption to energy supplies and increased scrutiny of European Union's countries' reliance on imported fossil fuels. Germany has already halted the Nord Stream 2 Baltic Sea gas pipeline project, which was expected to double the flow of the Russian gas to the European nation. Now, Russia is still remaining a major energy supplier. And as sanctions kicked in, there's a fear that the Kremlin might disrupt the supply of natural gas. However, even during the peak of the Cold War, the Soviet Union did not resort to such extreme tactics. Do you think President Putin could cut off the gas supply to Europe to teach them a lesson for supporting Ukraine?
At the moment, President Putin is at the receiving end. Never in the history of mankind have such biting sanctions been imposed. I don't think that it is in Mr. Putin's interest to cut off the gas supplies. But the question is whether the US sanctions will allow Europe to import hydrocarbons, oil and gas from Russia, because the whole effort is to maim the Russian economy, to disrupt the relationship between Europe and Russia. So that is the big challenge. And even if that there is flow of gas, how would payments be made? So if one of the objectives of the US was to increase European dependence on the US, then that objective will be served well. Europe knows about it, and especially France and Germany are not on the same page even now with the US, and in Europe with Italy and England. But nobody is making it easy. Everybody is obdurate. Everybody is engaging in brinkmanship. Everybody is trying to stare down the other, with the result that things are escalating. And in case there are two red lines. One is that if a no-fly zone is imposed over Ukraine, or there are the NATO boots on ground, then I think all bets are off. And I hope that cooler heads prevail. And even now people step back. But at the moment it seems that brinkmanship is continuing, and the possibility of meaningful talks are still distant in the horizon.
Ambassador Prakash, we talked about the impact of energy supplies to Europe, but coming closer to our own home, we have seen, there is a discussion about what it means for India. Indian government has already said that we are closely monitoring the global energy market as well as potential energy supply disruptions. But experts are saying that this Russia-Ukraine war will have a ripple effects on India's fuel prices. We have seen the price continue to remain elevated amid continuing conflict. The immediate impact from Russia-Ukraine war could be inflation, as we import almost 80% of our oil needs. Though there is an interesting thing that out of the 80%, only 2% comes from Russia. So it is making us less vulnerable to supply disruptions. But as a country and as a part of the global economy, we are also susceptible to the global price rise. How do you see this impact in our own domestic front?
We will be impacted in numerous ways. Energy certainly, but as you very rightly said, it may not be so much of a supply problem, but even there could be a supply issue, because if Russian hydrocarbon supplies to Europe gets disrupted, then the Middle Eastern hydrocarbon supplies, some of them would have to be diverted to Europe to meet the gap, because US alone cannot substitute for Russia. So there will be supply side constraints. There could be supply side constraints also. And given the strained relationship between Saudi Arabia and USA, OPEC may not play ball in increasing the supply. So there could be a supply side constraint. There would be certainly a price factor. And we are still struggling with the consequences of the COVID pandemic. So this is not good news for the prospects of Indian economic growth. But for us, frankly, it is a nightmarish scenario. We have China breathing down our neck. We have a very important relationship with Russia, not just in the hydrocarbon sector, where we have invested something like $15 billion, but in the area of defense cooperation, nuclear energy cooperation, outer space, all that could be impacted. And there is the pressure from the US. They have been publicly been a little restrained, but privately I think they would be conveying their expectation. So it's a cliche, but India is literally between the rock and the hard place. And the prospects of increased dependence on the West and the US is not very heartening, because US, like any big power, tends to be prescriptive.
US tends to be prescriptive. So let's hope that the de-escalation happens soon and the peace prevails. Thank you very much for your time, Ambassador Prakash.
Thank you very much.
This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on our Twitter handle at AIR News Alerts.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned that Ukrainian statehood is in jeopardy and equated the West's sanctions on Russia to declaring war. Mr. Putin added that if they continue to do what they are doing, they are calling into question the future of Ukrainian statehood. And if this happens, it will be entirely on their conscience. The Russian president also hit out at Western sanctions that have affected his country's economy and sent the value of his currency tumbling. 10 days after Russian forces began their operations, efforts to enforce the temporary ceasefires in Mariupol and the eastern city of Volnovakha showed no signs of improvement. Ukrainian officials said Russian artillery fire and airstrikes had prevented residents from leaving before the agreed-to evacuations got underway. Russia accused Ukraine of sabotaging ceasefire effort. A third round of talks between Russia and Ukraine will take place on Monday, according to David Arakhamia, a member of the Ukrainian delegation. Previous meetings were held in Belarus and led to the failed ceasefire agreement to create humanitarian corridors for the evacuation of children, women and older people from besieged cities.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has told Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan that Moscow would only halt its military operation if Ukraine stopped fighting and its demands were met. The Russian news agency Interfax reported that President Putin, during his phone call with President Erdogan, said that the operation was going according to plan and to schedule. The agency quoted Kremlin saying Mr. Putin expressed hope that Ukrainian negotiators would take a more constructive approach at talks and take into account the reality on the ground. However, Turkish President's office said Mr. Erdogan has appealed for an urgent general ceasefire.
Israel Prime Minister Naftali Bennett said his country will continue to assist in finding a diplomatic solution to the Ukraine crisis. The Israeli Prime Minister was speaking during his cabinet meeting hours after returning from a surprise meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. Mr. Bennett then travelled to Germany, where he met Chancellor Olaf Scholz. The Israeli Prime Minister revealed no details about his talks with the Russian President, but called the country's mediation efforts as moral duty. Earlier, Mr. Bennett's office said Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and he spoke over the phone, the third such call between the two leaders over the past day.
The UN Security Council is scheduled to hold an emergency meeting on Monday on the humanitarian crisis triggered in Ukraine as the Russian military operations intensify. The French and Mexican missions to the UN are seeking the Council's approval of a resolution calling for unhindered humanitarian access in Ukraine. According to media reports, the meeting will be followed by closed consultations on a draft resolution on the humanitarian plight in Ukraine. In news just in, India concluded its efforts to evacuate over 700 Indian students from the embattled northeastern Ukrainian city of Sumy on Sunday. However, it found little success as severe shelling and airstrikes continued. Meanwhile, a tweet from the Indian embassy in Ukraine said that its team has been stationed in Poltava to coordinate safe passage of Indian students stranded in Sumy to western borders via Poltava. It said a confirmed time and date for evacuating the students will be issued soon.
India's first indigenous flying trainer, Hansa NG, has successfully completed the sea-level trials. Designed and developed by the CSIR National Aerospace Laboratories of Bangalore, the aircraft completed the trials at Puducherry between 19th of February and the 5th of March. It was flown to Puducherry, covering 140 nautical miles in 1.5 hours at a cruising speed of 155 km per hour on 19th of February. CSIR NAL sources said that all the objectives of the sea-level trials are met. Hansa NG is designed to meet the Indian Flying Club needs, and it is an ideal aircraft for commercial pilot licensing due to its low cost and low fuel consumption.
Moving on to sports now, and in men's cricket, India registered a thumping win against Sri Lanka by an innings in 222 runs in the first test match at Mohali. With the win, India have now taken a 1-0 lead in the two-match series. Ravindra Jadeja was announced the man of the match for his all-round performance. He scored an unbeaten 175 runs and snared 9 wickets across both the innings. Earlier, India enforced the follow-on after bowling out Sri Lanka for just 174 in the first innings. India's ace off-spinner Ravichandran Ashwin also took his 435th test wicket on Sunday to become the second highest wicket taker for India in the longest format. He overtook legendary all-rounder Kapil Dev, who had 434 wickets to his name. Ashwin is now only behind Anil Kumble's 619 test wickets. The next match in the series is a day and night test scheduled to begin on the 12th of March in Bengaluru.
In ICC Women's Cricket World Cup, India defeated Pakistan by 107 runs in their opening encounter at the Bay Oval in New Zealand today. Opting to bat, India posted 244 runs for 7 wickets. Smriti Mandhana, Sneh Rana and Pooja Vastrakar scored half-centuries each to propel the innings total past the 240-run mark. In reply, Pakistan were bowled out in 37 overs at the score of 137 runs. Rajeshwari Gaikwad claimed 4 wickets, while Jhulan Goswami and Sneh Rana claimed 2 wickets each. Earlier, Indian skipper Mithali Raj won the toss and decided to bat first. Mithali became first woman cricketer to feature in 6 ODI World Cups. Sports Minister Anurag Thakur has congratulated Indian women's cricket team on their victory. In a tweet, Thakur said, "It was a superb performance and a spectacular start to the World Cup."
And now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. Let us take a look at the press reports on China. Prasar Bharati Beijing reports that State Councillor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi encouraged Russia and Ukraine to hold talks directly. He said this in a telephonic conversation with Secretary of State Blinken of the United States at his request. The New York Times reports China's slowing economy tops agenda in its legislative session. Russia's invasion of Ukraine went unmentioned at the opening of an annual gathering of China's legislature as leaders focused on stabilizing economic growth. South China Morning Post reports that the China-Europe Railway Express, or China Railway Express, a key logistical cog in President Xi Jinping's Belt and Road Initiative, is under tremendous pressure due to Ukraine crisis. Reuters reports that China is carrying out more than a week of military drills in the South China Sea in an area between its southern province of Hainan and Vietnam, the government announced, warning ships to stay away. Associated Press writes that the International Paralympic Committee is demanding answers from China's state broadcaster after an impassioned anti-war speech by its head appeared to have been censored during the Beijing Winter Games opening ceremony on Friday evening. Nikkei Asia reports the condition of China's winter wheat crop could be the worst in history, the agriculture minister said on Saturday, raising concerns about grain supplies in the world's biggest wheat consumer. China recently allowed imports of Russian wheat. South China Morning Post reported that the EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell has spoken out strongly in favor of China mediating in Russia's war against Ukraine. Europe or US can't mediate in crisis, so China must play a role, Josep Borrell said.
Now let us take a look at the press reports on Nepal. Khabar Hub reports that the Minister for Home Affairs Balkrishna Khan and Minister of Communication and Information Technology Gyanendra Bahadur Karki have called on President Bidya Devi Bandhari at the President's office, Sheetal Nivas, on Sunday. The Himalayan Times writes that Home Minister Balkrishna Khan has expressed confidence that the Millennium Challenge Cooperation Compact, ratified by Parliament, would contribute to prosperity and economic development of the country. He said that the government would not do anything that would affect country's sovereignty and national integrity. Khabar Hub also reports that Socialist CPNUS Chairman Madhav Kumar Nepal has said that the House of Representatives can be dissolved. According to the Kathmandu Post, the Parliament has moved forward the impeachment motion filed against Chief Justice Cholendra Shamsher Rana. The Himalayan Times reports that the chairperson of the CPNUML, KP Sharma Oli, has suggested naming Province 1 as Koshi. And the Hong Kong Post reported that with the world's attention diverted towards the events in Ukraine, China is continuing its repression of the Tibetan culture and identity, even introducing more draconian methods to accomplish the task, a media report said on Saturday.
Let us have some brief news from Afghanistan now. Khalij Times headline reads, India to send 8,000 tons of wheat to Afghanistan this month. It says that in total, India plans to send 50,000 tons of wheat to Afghanistan on an infrequently used land route through Pakistan. News 18 has carried an exclusive story titled A Wheaty Affair. Afghanistan slams poor quality wheat sent by Pakistan, heaps praise on India. It says that claiming that the wheat sent by Pakistan was rotten. Taliban authorities also said that the food grain supplied to them by India was of high quality. The print reports that Afghanistan has praised the quality of Indian wheat supplied to the trouble-torn country as part of its humanitarian aid. India on Saturday said that it has already shipped 4,000 tons of the grain by the Pakistan border, and the third batch of a shipment of 2,000 tons is scheduled for March the 8th. Hindustan Times writes that the Taliban leader Sirajuddin Haqqani makes his first public appearance. Haqqani was photographed attending the Saturday graduation ceremony of the first class to complete police training since the Taliban assumed control of Afghanistan.
Let us have some brief news from Dhaka now. The 28 rescued Bangladeshi crew members of the freight ship, which was hit by a Russian rocket, has safely reached Bucharest after crossing into Romania from Ukraine, reports Daily Star. The government of Bangladesh is eyeing to secure a minimum of 9,180 crore taka by auctioning 180 megahertz spectrum for 5G and other technology on 31st of March, reports Business Standard. Information and Broadcasting Minister of Bangladesh, Dr. Hassan Mahmood, has said that the purchasing power of people has increased 3 times over the last 13 years.
And now, before we end, let us take a look at the headlines once again. Prime Minister Narendra Modi attributes success of Operation Ganga to India's growing influence in the global arena. Over 15,900 Indians brought back from Ukraine's neighboring countries under Operation Ganga so far. Russian President Vladimir Putin says West's sanctions on Russia are equivalent to declaring war. UN Security Council scheduled to hold emergency meeting on Monday on humanitarian crisis triggered in Ukraine due to Russian military operations. In men's cricket, India beat Sri Lanka by an innings in 222 runs in the first cricket test at Mohali, take a 1-0 lead in 2-match series. And in Women's Cricket World Cup, India thrashed Pakistan by 107 runs in their opening encounter in New Zealand.
And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favourite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artists from Ghana on their Independence Day.
And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.